my little introductory spiel and everything. Hello, welcome. My name is Brianna Belfontaine-Krupski. I'm currently the Civics Teacher Leader Fellow up at the Maine DOE Office of Teaching and Learning, and I'm also a teacher at Scarborough High School. And today I am joined with Todd West, who is part of the Maine Civics Network steering committee. He's a member of it as well. Also, is looking through the Youth Leadership Challenge Coordinator and working on the Rural Aspirations Project. Um, we're here today to kind of have a conversation about the organization known as the Maine Civics Network, which, as somebody that's been teaching for a few years, I know I kind of learned about it earlier on this year. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity for civics teachers across the state of Maine. I think we need to spread the word about the Maine Civics Network and all of the good work that they're hoping to start doing across our state to engage students more so with excitement about civics and civic education. Um, I do just want to note here, just real quickly, information shared as a resource and isn't an endorsement by the Maine DOE. But obviously, we're here as part of my gig this year is to hopefully bring in some resources and topics for folks to have access to in their classrooms. So I'm gonna stop sharing now, and Todd, I will let you share away and talk a little bit more about yourself and the organization you represent.
Great. Thank you, Brianna. Is my screen sharing?
We got it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and excited about civics and appreciate the invitation to be here and talk about the Maine Civics Network. Um, the Maine Civics Network, you mentioned it's something you learned about just earlier this year, and the reason is because it's a very new effort to think about how to make civic learning come alive for our students and our teachers in the state of Maine. We've only been in existence for about a year at this point, and currently consist of a steering committee made up of four people, Emmanuel Pariser, Gordon Donaldson, Edith Berger, and myself. I'm a former social studies teacher as well as middle school and high school principal. I currently work with the Rural Aspirations Project, which is a nonprofit educational organization, and I coordinate the Washington County Youth Leadership Challenge, which is an example of the sort of hands-on, locally focused civic engagement that the Maine Civics Network is all about. That project involves connecting middle schools and high schools in Washington County with their local municipal governments to dig in and collaboratively solve challenges that both the students and the community leaders think is important. So that's just one kind of example of the sort of civic engagement that we're talking about. Um, the Maine Civics Network came about during the 2020 elections uh, and started as a project called Youth Work Makes the Booth Work, led by Emmanuel Pariser. And that project focused on training high school seniors to be volunteer poll workers
Love
during the
it.
pandemic. Yeah, when there was concern that perhaps maybe not all of the poll workers would feel safe or be able to come out and volunteer at the polls. As anyone knows who's ever voted in Maine, our democratic machinery is dependent on, a core of mostly elderly folks who volunteer a lot of time and really make sure that our elections happen. And so that Youth Work Makes the Booth Work project was about finding ways to help youth connect with that process. And in debriefing with that project with the students, the students who did participate really found it highly valuable and very educational. A lot of them felt that they really understood some of the aspects of like I said, the mechanics of democracy, how voting works, how elections work in ways that they never had before, and wish that they had had additional opportunities to sort of learn about civics firsthand in their local communities. And that's where the Maine Civics Network concept came from in 2022 and then was field tested during the last school year with some educators. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And really, the Maine Civics Network is gearing up for something called Making Civic Learning Come Alive, which is a pilot professional learning experience that is launching this spring. It's launching in February, and I'll talk about that also. Um, but the Maine Civics Network really is about sort of addressing head on this challenge of declining civic engagement across all aspects of our society. It's not just youth who are less engaged. It's adults. It's everybody.
Yeah.
As you can see from the chart on the right hand side there, Maine kind of is ahead of the national average in some important dimensions of civic participation, like attending public meetings and contacting public officials. But um, it's still that level of participation is probably below where a lot of people might say a thriving uh, civic ecosystem would be. Um, and so, that's not new. There's been a lot of conversation about that. There's always reference to how to educate students to take on that role of citizen and that connection between civics education and civic engagement.
Yes.
A lot of times, civic instruction, I know this from my own time as a social studies teacher, there's a lot of focus on the rules of how government happens and the structures, right? We spend a lot of time talking about how bills become laws and the three branches of government, and that's all really, really important and should be part of our civic education. But it often is not enough. It's usually limited to secondary social studies classes. Sometimes it's limited to a class called civics, but not always. And if you think about it, students kind of lack the opportunities to learn and practice civic skills. And I have a teenage daughter, and the example that I give is with civics, it's almost like we ask students to take the written test that students take to get their driver's license, but they don't have to take the road test.
Yeah.
They don't have to actually practice it. And so, um, and that's not to say that there's not examples of that out there. There are certainly a lot of educators who do a great job providing those opportunities, and students do have, that civic learning experience that is hands-on and participatory. But it's not easy to do, and it certainly is not something that's happening everywhere.
Yep.
We also know that, it's a very challenging environment to teach civics in. There's a divisive political environment right now. There's a lot of pushback sometimes. Sometimes there's confusion between teaching politics and teaching civics and like where the line is between those two things. They really make it challenging for schools and teachers to want to dive in and do more civics. I think sometimes the tendency is to perhaps do less
Yeah.
because it feels a little bit more comfortable. And also, there's not a lot of meaningful professional development for teachers in social studies in general, but civics in specific. And I think that a lot of teachers perhaps feel unprepared to teach in such a uh, tenuous environment. They're worried about maybe doing it wrong or not having
Yeah.
enough information. And so, really thinking about how teachers can get the resources and information that would help them feel more comfortable and confident teaching civics, especially those who aren't social studies teachers.
Yeah.
Is really one of the key things that the Maine Civics Network is interested in. Folks may be aware that last fall in October, a report was released called Strengthening Maine's Civic Life, Trust Belonging in the Future, and it was written by the Maine Community Foundation and the Goldfarb Center at Colby College. Um, and I'll put that link in the chat here if folks haven't seen it. At least I think I'll put it in the chat. Um, but really, what this report was hoping to do was offer a landscape analysis of sort of what is the state of civics in Maine right now, and it wasn't limited just to youth. It was across all age groups, all demographics, and they really looked at a bunch of different indicators that sort of set a baseline for the civic health of Maine, and their intention is to perhaps revisit this and track progress over time. But in addition to this landscape analysis, they also offered some recommendations. And one of the recommendations that shows up consistently throughout the report is this idea that um, focusing on civic education, K-12 and post-secondary is a really powerful strategy. And specifically, they mentioned this sort of entry point through local government, that experiential civic education that connects students with their local governmental groups, whether it's a select board or a town meeting or town man, anything that connects students locally with some relevant and sort of hands-on civic learning is really a great entry point into civic education. And one note that I'll make in my work with the Youth Leadership Challenge in Washington County is this sort of concept of youth and adults working together to make their communities the best it can be is something that is pretty agreeable to everyone. And so it sort of takes the temperature down on that whole idea of teaching civics. And is it too controversial, or is it, um, are we teaching it the right way? I think a lot of folks really are interested in having students be involved in the civic life of their community, especially if it's sort of working together um, to make things the best that they can be. And so this concept of sort of hands-on local civic learning is really what the Maine Civics Network is hoping to promote as a means of getting more students sort of that on the ground civic experience.
Definitely need more of that, I think, in my
Yeah.
opinion. More
So
involvement, get that involvement going.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that, locally, Maine is lucky. Maine has very accessible local governments,
Yeah.
especially when you look at it compared to other regions of the country. And so there's a really good opportunity there. Um, that will open doors for student engagement,
Yes.
kind of low barrier opportunities.
Yep.
So the Maine Civics Network, our vision is to coordinate, catalyze, and amplify civic learning opportunities for Maine students all across the state. We see this happening through a collaborative of a lot of different constituents. So we would like students to be part of our collaborative. We would like educators to be part of our collaborative. We would like policymakers to be part of it, and community leaders and funders. Really anyone who's interested in making civic learning more hands-on and embedded in community life would be a good candidate to be part of the Maine Civics Network. The Maine Civics Network sounds like a very formal structure, but it's not. So if there's folks who are interested in joining us, we're very happy to have folks be part of the conversation and talk about how Maine students and schools can increase the civic engagement of their students. One of our core beliefs is that civics is a cross-cutting theme. It's not just a content area, and it's not just for middle school and high school social studies class. That civics really is relevant to all educators. It's relevant to all students. It's one of those really important outcomes that public education is providing for students. For those of us that have been around a while, a responsible citizen has been one of the guiding principles since the very first learning results books when it was in book form
Yes.
way back in 1997. So, this idea that civics sort of cuts across all content areas and grade levels has long been valued, and it's a key piece of the Maine Civics Network philosophy. Down the line, we're not here yet, but we do hope that down the line, the Maine Civics Network can be a resource hub. We'd like to have some learning resources for youth. We'd like to have some teaching resources for educators. We aspire to provide in-person and online collaboration with folks who are interested in making civic learning come alive. Um, but our starting point is professional development opportunities for teachers. And so that's where we're starting this year. That's where we're, putting the bulk of our effort right now. But we hope down the road to be able to, if this collaborative does include all these different groups of students and teachers and others, we hope to have some resources and opportunities for all of them. Um, So, as I mentioned, we field tested this vision last year,
Yeah.
starting with what we called a listening tour in November of 2023. So, we held three regional meetings. They were in Saco and Hinckley and Winter Harbor. So, we tried to cover the breadth of the state as best we
Yeah.
could. We were limited to three
Yeah.
meetings. It's still a big state. We couldn't cover all of it. But really what we wanted to do was draw on the experience of educators who are out there actually making the efforts to teach hands-on, locally engaged civic learning. And so this listening tour was just what it sounded like. We posed a series of questions to teachers. We asked them, what efforts have you attempted in this area? How have you attempted to sort of go deeper with civic learning with your teachers? Um, Civic education is something that's is talked about, but we were really interested in what teachers kind of on the ground felt were the most important components of civic education. So what makes good civic education? And I'll get to what we heard from them in a second on the next slide. And we wanted to talk with teachers about the opportunities and challenges for civic learning. So, granted, this was over a year ago, but as it stands now, post COVID, in the educational world that we live in, um, what are some realistic opportunities that teachers see, and what are some of the challenges that they face in trying to do this sort of civic learning? And that was very useful information to get from them. And then we also asked these teachers, how could a Maine Civics network support you? What are the types of offerings and opportunities that a Maine Civics network could put out there to educators that educators would feel is useful and beneficial? The last thing we wanted to do was create something that felt really good to a bunch of folks who are not in the classroom, and not have it actually be useful to teachers. So this has been an effort that's been very informed by teachers from the very beginning. We summarized our findings. I'll
Awesome.
drop the link to that into the chat as well, the report of our listening tour, if anyone's interested. And do want to give a shout out to the Unity Foundation that has generously funded all of last year's activities and continues to fund the Maine Civics Network. So we appreciate that. Um, when we took everything we heard from teachers in November and actually had a focus group of some additional educators and asked them to help us put together an educator workshop last May in 2024. So we reconvened all the folks who had been part of the listening tour, as well as some additional new faces, and had an educator workshop, and it was in West Gardner this time. And the goal was to introduce participants to what we felt some of the key elements of a learning network might be. So, the educator component of the Maine Civics Network,
Yep.
we think is most powerful if it's a community of practice of educators who are engaging in this work and can sort of create that community and have those places to share and help each other in their practice. So most of the day was made up of small group consultations. Each teacher brought with them a challenge from their own practice. We asked them to bring something that they were working on in their civic teaching practice last spring that they were hoping to do differently, to do better, that they were stuck on. A unit or an activity that they had tried and maybe didn't go as well as they wanted. And we had a protocol that let them share what they were working on and then get feedback from three or four other teachers, and have a discussion around that. And then in turn, the teacher got to also listen to three or four other teachers' civic teaching challenges and offer feedback. So it was a dry run of sort of that community of practice
Yep.
that we want to create for civics teachers. And the feedback that we got from educators last spring was that was really useful. They found it to be a highly engaging and rewarding way to spend the day. Several of them have commented that in the school year, you just don't get a lot of opportunities to spend time talking about your practice with other
Yeah.
teachers on something that you're really interested in. And so they appreciated the opportunity to do that. We also spent the afternoon again engaging educators in some collaborative co-design of, we asked them if we were going to design a 6-month pilot professional learning network for civics, how could it be structured? What would work for teachers? And what are the outcomes that you would like to see that you would find meaningful? And I'm going to, a couple slides down the road here, we're going to talk about what that ended up looking like. But one of the really important outcomes of the listening tour and the spring educator workshop was the identification of what we ultimately have called the 5 catalyzers of civic learning. So, like I said, these grew out of that question that we posed teachers of what are the important components of civic education. There's a lot of research out there that talks about what civic learning and civic instruction should include, but we're really interested from folks on the ground, like as you sift that through your own teaching practice and you're actually working with kids and kind of facing the constraints and realities of the day to day, what are the things that you think are most important? And so these 5 catalyzers are really what rose up. Um, and so, if you look there, one of the first one is that it's really important to develop civic skills. And the teachers that we talked with were really clear that civic knowledge, again, the 3 branches of government, how a bill becomes a law, that's all really important,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't stop there. That students need a chance to practice things like listening, um, civil discourse,
Yes.
collaborative decision making, that if they don't have those skills, then it's not going to matter that they have the knowledge.
Yes.
And educators were really also articulate about it's not just about telling students what the skills are. It's not just about saying you need to be able to listen respectfully. It's about giving them opportunities to practice listening
Yeah.
respectfully so that those skills can develop. Um, they also, across the board talked about how important it is to give students opportunities to look into, what we called real world matters. And, just that old idea that things that are relevant to students, whether it's at the local level or the national level or the global level, integrating that into the instruction increases engagement, as does making it hands-on. I think anyone who's been in a classroom recently knows that just capturing the interest of students is challenging these days. And anytime students can be doing something, learning through doing versus learning through listening for many students really helps kind of solidify some of those concepts and helps them make those connections. So that's one of the catalyzers. The fourth catalyzer, generating agency, hope, and connection, for me was the most interesting one that came out of that. It was actually what teachers talked about the most, is that as they were thinking about their civic instruction, they talked about helping students develop their sense of agency, that they can in fact um, have a say and make a difference on things that are important to them. But sort of part and parcel with that was making sure that students have what we call the sense of civic hope. That a lot of students talk about um, feeling like no one is interested in what they have to say, and that even if they do put the effort out there, nothing's going to change. And so, if you don't feel like your engagement is going to matter, you're less likely to engage.
Yeah.
And that's a reasonable conclusion to reach. I think it doesn't apply just to students. I think a lot of adults feel that way as
Hmm.
well. So a lot of teachers talked about how their efforts to sort of generate this sense of civic hope and help students see how and why their participation matters or their engagement matters was a really important component of what they did. And related to that was this idea of community connection, very similar to the civic hope, that civics is about interacting with the community and sort of as a community talking about who we are and who we want to be and how we want to, how we want to make decisions and go through life together as a community. But if you don't feel like you're part of a community, you're probably not interested in applying skills to that conversation. And so those three things kind of all work together. Feeling connected to a community, having a sense of civic hope, and
Yep.
developing agency. And those themes really came up a lot from teachers, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
And really is a key part, I think, of effective civic instruction. Um,
absolutely.
and then the last catalyzer is just thinking about democratic structures in our schools, that our schools provide opportunities to teach civics and practice civic skills all day long. Um, that any teacher can think about ways to promote civil discourse in their classroom. Every teacher I've ever spoken with wants effective classroom discussions. That's what civil discourse is. Any teacher has the opportunity in their classroom to provide developmentally and situationally appropriate choice. It doesn't mean that students get to make every choice all the time, but thinking about where are those opportunities where students can actually practice um, discussing the pros and cons of different ways to do things and develop that agency, practice those skills. So these five catalyzers are sort of the framework for everything that the Maine Civics Network does when thinking about civic education. So I'll drop those in the chat also. Um, but these catalyzers, that's what we want to help students and teachers do more of. That's what the Maine
Yeah,
Civics Network is about. And that educators could use these as a lens through which they can think about their own civic teaching practice. And again, it doesn't have to just be social studies class. I was talking with the science teacher last week who does a lot of citizen science, and they talked about how all these components are as applicable in science class
yeah,
as they are in social studies class. So they're really something that any educator can draw off of and use as a lens to think about.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Civics
So
is everywhere. It's everywhere.
yeah,
It's in
that's right.
every
That's
part of
what
our
I've been
lives.
saying for 25 years.
Yep.
So this is all culminating in a professional development opportunity that's going to start next month called Making Civic Learning Come Alive. This is I mentioned coming out of last spring, teachers helping us design a pilot professional learning opportunity. That's what this Making Civic Learning Come Alive is. Um, so it's a very self-directed professional development opportunity in the sense that participants are going to get to choose an area of focus from their own practice. We're envisioning teachers coming wanting to do something in their civics teaching practice that's different or solve a challenge that I've always had a hard time getting students to do this in my class, or I'd really like to do more of this. But teachers will bring this challenge and something that's directly relevant to their day-to-day teaching in the spring, and that they're going to have an opportunity to really work through it with Maine Civics Network facilitators, as well as some other colleagues, and think about how they can iterate improvements on that practice. So, just to be clear, this is not a program. It's not a training. We're not going to, teach you how to make civic learning come alive in 7 easy steps.
Yeah.
But it's really more, it's a chance for teachers to reflect on their civic teaching practice and make changes that they're interested in making in a collegial and supportive professional learning environment. So what that's going to look like is there's going to be 4 in-person sessions. Those are going to run all day, 9 to 2:30 or so. Uh, First one starts February 6th, so there's still time if folks are interested. They can sign up and participate, but it is coming up soon. A month from yesterday, I guess that would be. And then we'll meet again in March and May and June. So there's these 4 in-person sessions where, we'll do some whole group activities, we'll do some small group activities, some individual reflection and planning, all facilitated by myself and some other Maine Civics Network folks. And then in between the in-person sessions, there's going to be some small group meetings, after school, early evening, could be virtual or in person. We're picturing, a group of 3 or 4 educators and a Maine Civics Network facilitator, scheduling them at times and in settings that work for them. So, if what works best for everyone involved is to meet at 7 o'clock once everyone's had supper and gotten home and dealt with helping folks with homework and that sort of stuff, then that's when it can be. If what works best is to meet on Sunday evening, then folks can meet on Sunday evening. It'll be up to the participants to schedule
Yep.
those. And like I said, they could be virtual or in person, depending, if the small group is close enough in proximity, they could meet in person if they want. Um, and those are to keep the thread going. If you notice, there's a month or so in between those in-person meetings, and we want that conversation and learning to continue so that those efforts to focus on your practice don't get pushed to the background
Yeah.
as the day-to-day of teaching, pulls your attention elsewhere. Anyone who participates has the option to earn 3 graduate credits. It's not you can take it as a non-credit bearing course as well, or workshop as well. But if you're interested in graduate credits, if you need them for recertification, we have those. It's a satellite class offered by Thomas College.
Awesome.
And so you can earn three graduate credits. The cost for the non-graduate credit option is $700, $1,600 for the graduate credit option. And then we do have financial assistance that is available, again, thanks to support from the Unity Foundation and the Dahlia Fund at the Maine Community Foundation. So, if those prices are a bit more than some local school budgets might be able to afford right now,
Yep.
we certainly have an opportunity to make that more accessible for folks. And registration will be open until Friday, January 31st. So we hope that some more folks join us. Like I said, it's not too late. And if folks are interested in registering, they can go right to our website, which is maincivics.net. I'll put it in the chat as well. But they can go right to our website, and when they go there, at the very top, there's a button that says register for Making Civic Learning Come Alive, and they can click that and go from there. So,
That's awesome.
yeah. So anyway, we hope, like I said, the Maine Civics Network is new. We're still small. We do have a vision. We think it's pretty exciting. Brianna thinks it's pretty exciting. So,
I do. I'm
that's all we.
excited.
Yeah. But there's a lot of different ways to join us. If a um, series of 4 workshops and or a graduate course is just not in the cards for you this spring, if it's too much, that's okay. You can still be part of the Maine Civics Network. You can learn more about what we're doing. If you think someone else might be interested in what we're doing, please feel free to share with them. You can participate in the professional development this spring, but we're hoping to offer future events. We are hoping if our Making Civic Learning Come Alive offering this spring is successful, which we assume it will be, we're interested in offering in other regions of the state. For example, we would love to offer something in Presque Isle or somewhere in the county for, folks so they don't have to travel so much for their PD. We would like to offer other professional development opportunities based on what folks would feel is useful. So, just some of the things that I've heard are a workshop on, we call it Town Meeting 101, but if someone's interested in taking their class to a town meeting or a select board meeting or a city council meeting, what are some of the ways to structure that and approach that that can make it successful? Because it's surprisingly difficult to get kids. I know many schools where the town office and the school are about 200 yards apart, and getting students
Yeah.
to the town office at 6:30 at night for a select board meeting is surprisingly challenging,
Yes.
because of all those logistical
Oh,
issues that
yeah.
we know. Something like Town Meeting 101 or Civics for non-social studies teachers,
Yep.
or a workshop on building a democratic classroom. All those things are the types of things that we'd be interested in offering if there's interest, from folks participating in that. If you're not a teacher, we're interested in other organizations being partner organizations. It's not limited just to educators. Like I said, eventually we'd like to have students be part of the Maine Civics Network. Um, but if anyone wants more information, our website and my email is there. Certainly feel free to contact us. And I think that information, if I'm not mistaken, will be included on
Yes.
the archive of
Oh,
this
yes.
webinar.
It'll
Yeah,
be all present.
yeah.
Um,
So thank you so much, Brianna, for allowing us to talk about the Maine Civics Network.
yes, of course. I'm excited for the fact that A exists and B, like the plans that you have. And I think it's something that a lot of folks in, our realm of education are kind of craving and looking for is trying to kind of build out those networks. I know for something I'm a part of, I work a little bit with the National Constitution Center, and every like 4 times a year we have like our little Zoom meetings with our little teacher advisory board that we have, and it's wonderful to kind of meet and have those conversations with like-minded folks. And so this kind of seems like a nice local version of that, of having like civics teachers try to meet, get together and be like, how can we spice up civics and the times that we're living in? What can we do? Let's work together, let's figure things out. And I think that's definitely something that is missing, and I think it's an exciting approach for things for sure.
Yeah, that came through loud and clear from the listening session is just teachers are really craving opportunities to
Yes.
sit down and talk with other teachers about how can we make this possible? These things that we want to do, that we would like to do, how can we move past the challenges and work together and feel like we have that supportive network of colleagues to take that first step.
Yes, exactly. And I know just briefly over the sessions, do you guys have a location for the in-person
Oh,
sessions yet?
yes. Yes, I should have mentioned that. So we're going to be in
Okay.
Bangor area. We're still nailing down the specific locations, but that's on my Friday list of things to nail down. But we'll be in the Bangor area. The folks who have signed up so far tend to be kind of centered around that area, so we're going to meet there to start. But like I said, in the future, if it's successful, we'd love to take it to other areas of the
Yeah,
state.
I know we are a big state geographically.
Yeah.
I know we do have two folks that did jump on. If either of you have any questions, I will change my things up here. If you'll have any questions for Todd or I, feel free to take an opportunity to ask them now if needed.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. Okay. Um, my name is Bruce Flaherty, and I'm involved with the Spirit of America program, and there are some things you brought up that could tie together beautifully. This might go in too many different directions. I might be trying to go way too fast, but two things that might be opportunities. Let me toss this out. First of all, I don't know if any of you have heard of Spirit of America. What we've done, we've expanded